Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. Trying to get a quick one in before the end of the night tonight. The news is heat, and more heat, although we have also some torrential rain systems going on. This is a few days old, but I'm sure you heard about the boat capsizing in Missouri, killing over 10 people. Pretty crazy story. And unfortunately, a lot of people lost their lives. So just starting off with this from AccuWeather from today: heat wave to have a firm grip on northwestern U.S. into end of July. The remainder of July will be dominated by a resurgence of heat across the northwestern United States. The recent reprieve from the mid-July heat wave in the Northwest has come to an end, as the heat intensifying over the Southwest will also expand its grip northward. We're looking at, actually it was plus 100 today here, and we're looking at the same for at least the next 3 days. A stretch of heat actually looks to be longer than what was experienced in mid-July. AccuWeather senior meteorologist Dan Pidnowski said after returning on Sunday, the heat could last right through the weekend. Highs are expected to soar 5 to 15 degrees above normal daily through the final full week of July. This will translate into highs near 90 in Seattle, 90s in Portland, Oregon, around 100 in Pendleton, Oregon, Boise, Idaho, and the lower 100s in Medford, Oregon. Even though humidity levels will remain relatively low through the heat wave, many in the Pacific Northwest do not have air conditioning, so the prolonged heat wave will be dangerous with day after day of sunny and hot conditions, Pidnowski said. I mean, that's literally how hot it's going to be here in the Southwest, if not hotter. Higher humidity slows the rate at which the body can cool itself through sweat evaporating. Residents are reminded to drink plenty of water, wear light-colored clothing, and avoid strenuous activities during the midday and afternoon hours, the hottest times of the day. Never leave a child or pet in sealed vehicle without air conditioning, even for a short amount of time. Cars can become dangerously hot in only a matter of minutes. As of July 21, there has been 27 child hot car fatalities in the United States. Those seeking relief from the heat can head to the immediate coast, where more comfortable highs in the upper 60s and 70s will prevail. Related, heat exhaustion versus heat stroke. There's a couple of links here. So I'm going to link this below and y'all can see this. Fire crews battling nearly 24 wildfires burning across the Northwest should also be encouraged to take the necessary precautions to avoid heat exhaustion or stroke. As temperatures soar, trapped smoke from those blazes and pollutants can contribute to another hazard across the Northwest. Similar to what occurred in mid-July, the setup of calm, sunny, and increasingly hot weather will again allow air quality to deteriorate throughout the coming week. Anyone planning on spending time outdoors camping, hiking, or otherwise exercising should stay up to date on local air quality alerts. Poor air quality can force the elderly, children, and those with respiratory issues to limit time spent outside. The heat may get pushed back briefly during the first days of August. Prior to that, this heat wave can enter record books. The heat wave in mid-July led to 6 consecutive days of temperatures reaching or exceeding 90 in Portland. If the current stretch of heat lasts through July 30, as anticipated, a new record for the most 90-degree days in July can be set. July 2009 holds the record with 14 such days registered at the city's airport. The heat wave may also produce a few daily record highs in other cities across the Northwest. Speaking of which, it is downright hot right now. It's 10:30 p.m. In LA. The air is absolutely stagnant. There's not one ripple or trickle of a breeze, and it has been that way all day long. It's rather brutal because sleeping is going to be not very fun we don't have the air conditioning here, or at least not air conditioning that works well enough to reach the entire house. Moving on, a global heat wave has set the Arctic Circle on fire. This is from the Intelligencer. This is from 2 days ago, July 20. From Japan to Sweden and Oman to Texas, a global heat wave is setting records, igniting wildfires, and killing dozens all across the world this week. The South Central region is home to the highest temperatures in the U.S. this week, with nearly 35 million people living under excessive heat warnings issued by the National Weather Service. Temperatures are expected to be in the triple digits across Texas this weekend, marking the most severe heat wave in the state since 2011. Looking at temperatures between 110 and 115 in Texas, oh my God, with humidity, the humidity being what it is in Texas, that has got to be an absolute wipeout. Into the 100s, up into Nebraska, looking like into Illinois, into Missouri, Arkansas, etc. The Texas heat has already led to record-breaking days for Texas power grid twice this week. Things aren't any better anywhere else. Elsewhere in the region, with heat indexes in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana reaching up to 110 degrees. Well, I guess this is the heat index. So heat index is 110 to 115. I was going to say the actual temperature. That's a heat index of like 125. Heat index values are expected to range from around 100 degrees to 115 over portions of the central and southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley, including Arkansas. Across the globe, in Kyoto, Japan, Thursday marked the 7th straight day of temperatures exceeding 100 degrees, breaking all known records for the ancient capital city. Good God, at least 30 people have died in Japan during the heat wave, which has complicated rescue efforts following floods and landslides that killed more than 200 in western Japan earlier this month. On Thursday alone, 10 people died and 2,605 people were sent to the hospitals in Tokyo due to heat, the Japan Times reported. The day before, Tokyo rescue workers set a record by responding to more than 3,000 emergency calls. Meanwhile, in Sweden, the Arctic Circle is on fire. As we know, high temperatures and prolonged drought have caused 49 fires to ignite across Sweden, with temperatures reaching 90 degrees as far north as the Arctic Circle this week. I think that's not abnormal. I don't know what planet you are living on. According to the Washington Post, temperatures in Scandinavia typically settle in the 60s and 70s this time of year, meaning the current heat wave is making things around 20 degrees hotter than normal. The list of areas experiencing extreme temperatures keeps going. An Algerian city earlier this month broke the record for the highest temperature ever in Africa when they hit 124.3 degrees. We've heard this before. Highest lowest temperature ever recorded, Oman, 108 degrees on Earth, ever. Okay, I'm going to link this article below. Moving on to the latest, I think I read a synopsis of this on another site, but not this actual article. So some of this is the same information that I have given before, but this is from July 13th in the Arctic News. Disappearance of sea ice. The image on the right shows sea surface temperatures on July 6th for the years. So it's going through the sea surface temperatures that I covered before a couple days ago. 2014, minus 0.8 C, 2015, 6.2 C, 2016, 8.3 C, 2017, 14.4 C, 2018, 16.6 C. Situation reflects the rapid decline of the Arctic sea ice over the years and constitutes a stark warning of imminent sea ice collapse and its consequences for the world at large. I just saw an image on, I believe, the Arctic sea ice group on Facebook that Hudson Bay is almost completely gone. The ice is completely gone. The image on the right shows sea surface temperature on July 18th, 2018 at that location, which is, where is this? Near Svalbard. 17.2 C or 63 Fahrenheit. This compares to a sea surface temperatures of 5 C or 41.4 Fahrenheit, 41.1 Fahrenheit in 1981 to 2011 at that location. The images illustrate why sea ice has fallen dramatically in volume, especially so where sea currents push warm water from the Atlantic Ocean underneath the sea ice. On July 9th, 2018, Arctic sea ice volume was at a record low for the time of the year. And then this GIF of sea ice going down, from June 21st through July 12th. We are almost entirely 1 meter sea ice thickness, almost entirely, the entire Arctic, and less than 1 meter. So in many places about half a meter or more or less. The animation illustrates the huge amount of melting taking place from underneath due to an inflow of heat from the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and from warm waters from rivers that end in the Arctic Ocean. Meanwhile, sea ice extent doesn't fall very much at all. When only looking at sea ice extent, the dramatic fall in sea ice volume may be overlooked. Complete disappearance of Arctic sea ice in September 2018 is within the margins of a trend based on a yearly annual minimum volume, as illustrated by the image on the right. So a lot of this I've already covered. Oceans take up over 90% of global warming, as illustrated by the image below. Ocean currents make that huge amounts of this heat keep entering the Arctic Ocean from the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. Exponential rise in global ocean heat content. Once the sea ice is gone, further ocean heat must go elsewhere, i.e. will typically raise the temperature of the water. The atmosphere will also warm up faster. More evaporation will also occur once the sea ice is gone, which will cool the sea surface and warm up the atmosphere, technically known as latent heat of vaporization. As temperatures in the Arctic are rising faster than at the equator, the jet stream will change, making it easier for warm air to enter the Arctic. More clouds will form over the Arctic, which will reflect more sunlight into space, but which will also make that less outward IR radiation can escape into space over the Arctic, with a net warming effect. Meanwhile, El Nino is getting stronger, as illustrated by above image on the right. A warmer Arctic comes with stronger heat waves, forest fires, and associated emissions, and rapid warming of water and rivers that end in the Arctic Ocean, all of which will further warm up the Arctic Ocean. Forest fires have already been burning strongly in Siberia over the past few months, and methane recently reached levels as high as 2,817 parts per billion on July 8th, 2018. One huge danger is that as the buffer disappears that until now has consumed huge amounts of ocean heat, and the Arctic Ocean keeps warming, further heat will reach methane hydrates at the seafloor of the Arctic Ocean, causing them to get destabilized and release methane. Additionally, disappearance of the sea ice will come with albedo changes that mean that a lot more sunlight will be absorbed. Instead of getting reflected back into space as occurred previously. Similar albedo changes are likely to take place over the land and Arctic soon thereafter. Adding up all warming elements associated with disappearance of the sea ice can result in additional global warming several degrees Celsius. The situation is dire. Calls for comprehensive and effective action, as described in the climate plan. All right. More of the same. Where is this? Something I want to read. Excuse me. This is not going to be too long of a video. I'm going to read one more article, although it's very long and I may not read the whole thing. And guys, thank you for all the links. So many good links, and I can't even, I want to read every single one. And I will try to get to most, if not all, that I can. I would literally have to do like 2 or 3 of these videos a day easily to read all the articles that come across my desk on a daily basis. From the New York Times Magazine, The Water Wars of Arizona. Attracted by lax regulations, industrial agriculture has descended on a remote valley, depleting its aquifer, leaving many residents with no water at all. Early one morning in July 2014, Lori Pop awoke in her new home in the Sulphur Springs Valley of Arizona and began unpacking boxes of clothes, hanging photographs, and prepping the day's homeschooling lessons for her 2 teenage children. Pop, who until a few days earlier had never been to Arizona, was exhilarated to have finally arrived at the house on East Hopi Drive, a blue 2-bedroom trailer on 2 acres of land, but also exhausted. The move from Fallen Timber, Pennsylvania, where the family lived for 15 years, required a cross-country trip in the semi-truck that Lori's husband, Greg, drove for work, and now a long list of chores awaited. Outside, the day was already north of 80 degrees. Lori was just beginning to fill a glass of water. She noticed the stream from the faucet was cloudy and brown. The water looked like the desert surrounding the house, she said, the same color. Running her hand under the stream, she found what appeared to be small grains of sand. Small woman with a tight smile and a bright orange streak in her hair, Lori was immediately unnerved by the sight. Like all homes in the valley where there are no reservoirs or rivers, the Pop's house drew its water from a private well drilled into the underlying aquifer. According to the real estate listing, the well reached a depth of more than 300 feet. Lori, who is 51 and a mother of 5, reminded herself of this when, a few moments later, the sand appeared to clear and the water again looked normal. Busy with other projects, she scribbled a note to call the previous owners, figuring there was dirt clogged in the kitchen pipes. Soon enough, she forgot about it. A few days later, Lori and her daughter Amy were doing laundry, and the washing machine stopped filling with water. Then a few hours later, the dishwasher conked out too. Craig, who had serviced his own diesel truck for some 20 years, inspected both machines but couldn't find anything wrong with either. It was the pipes feeding them that seemed to be the issue. They merely trickled and sputtered out sand. Having lived in the rural mountains of Pennsylvania, Craig and Lori were both familiar with wells. They picked the house on East Hopi for its sweeping views eastward to the Chiricahua Mountains, Chiricahua Mountains, but also for the solitude that came with owning a remote piece of property, which was only possible so long as they had their own source of water. But as worrisome as the incidents seemed, they didn't yet form any recognizable pattern. One evening, sometime later, Lori drew a bath and left the room. When she returned a while later, she found the tub stood only half full, with the water murky with silt. She watched over the next few months as a thin layer of sand settled along the bottom. A local driller arrived for an inspection a short while later. Visible from most rooms in the house, the well consisted of 5 horsepower pump, an 8-inch wide borehole, and a screen that filtered dirt and rock from the aquifer's water. Although the well was somewhat old, it appeared to be in good working order, the driller explained, capable of pumping 25 gallons a minute, enough to supply a home many times larger than the Pops. The stoppages and intrusions of sand, he went on, in all likelihood signaled that the water level had begun dipping below the mouth of the pipe, causing the pump to act as a vacuum for sand. The problem wasn't the well. In other words, it was the aquifer, which had retreated well below where the well could reach it. "You're running out of water," Lori recalls the driller telling them. There was no way of knowing how long the remaining water might last. Lori was so overcome by panic that she forgot to ask the driller the many questions surging through her mind. When she had negotiated the home's lease-to-buy agreement over the phone for about $70,000, she took specific care to inquire about the well's water quality. In Fallen Timber, they had lost several dogs and donkeys to wasting illnesses that Lori suspected were related to a contaminated water table. But now, as she listened to the driller and several other experts she later consulted, it began to dawn on her that she had never thought to ask about the water quantity. It wasn't something you needed to think about in Pennsylvania. If you were washing your car and dropped the hose and let the hose run, no big deal, she says. There was always water. Over the next few weeks, as the Pops asked around, they heard from one neighbor, then a half dozen more who had begun finding sand in their water. Soon, at least 100 families from all across the valley had failing or dry wells. On September 24, after scores of angry families demanded action, a regularly scheduled visit from state representatives turned into a de facto emergency water meeting at the Chamber of Commerce. Word of the dry wells had traveled quickly around the state, and Michael J. Lacey, who was then the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, made the 3-hour drive from Phoenix for the standing room only meeting. The politicians had hardly begun to speak when men and women in cowboy hats grew impatient and cut them off, shouting, "Water!" For the next 2 hours, Lacey tried to retain control as panicked families rose one after the other and told their stories. The Pops didn't attend the meeting, but they needed only to drive a few miles in any direction to see where their water was going. Stretching outward from downtown Wilcox, the hub of the valley, lay a sprawling latticework of recently cultivated farms and nut orchards. Local farmers had watched over the last decade and a half as waves of industrial farms arrived, tilling so much land that dust storms began darkening the sky. These enormous corporations were descending on the valley for the same reason homesteaders had a century ago: the year-round growing season and the lax regulation. Compared with those for rivers and lakes, few laws govern the extraction of groundwater today. Aquifers across the globe are beginning to quietly dry up under the compounded strain of increased food production and a 2-decade stretch that now includes the 10 warmest years in recorded history, sending farmers plumbing deeper for deposits of water. At the meeting, residents accused farmers of sucking the water out from under them and the state of shirking its responsibilities. Lacey, the ADWR official, argued that the state couldn't put water back into their wells. The only solution for homeowners, the official explained, was to chase the water downward by deepening their wells a few hundred feet. The cost of this, the residents knew, was $15,000 to $30,000, as much as half the value of some homes in the valley. With most of their life savings invested in the home, the Pops couldn't afford to move or drill deeper. So in early October, Lori and Craig held a family meeting, talking with their children about a system of water rationing as they watched the well's output dwindle from 100 gallons a day to 50. The average household in Phoenix uses more than 540. Showers, they explained, would have to be fewer and faster. They set up buckets to catch runoff and poured leftover dishwater in the toilet. By the end of their 4 months in Arizona, fourth month in Arizona, it was unusual for the Pops to go 2 or 3 days. Wasn't unusual for the Pops to go 2 or 3 days without running water. Unthinkable just a few months before. A single thought began to occupy Lori's waking hours: what happens when we run out? Water is so crucial to the many aspects of our lives that it can be difficult to grasp just how much we use. The standard unit in farming, for instance, is the acre-foot. The amount it takes to cover an acre in a foot of water, which can seem like a huge quantity or not much at all, depending on how it's used or what comparisons you make. 325,851 gallons, half an Olympic pool, or 50 bushels of corn. The problem is even thornier below ground. Buried deep within the earth, groundwater is a largely hidden resource, but one that supplies 24 to 40% of global drinking water. Still, agriculture uses the bulk of it. About 70% of water withdrawn from aquifers is consumed by this one industry. Nearly all the planet's freshwater reserves, not stored in polar ice, lay at depths below 3,000 feet. Together they form one of the planet's largest waterways, a 6 quintillion gallon supply of ice age rain and snow that is almost entirely uncharted. Most North American aquifers lie beneath the western United States and date back to the beginning of the continent as we know it. 6 million years ago, as the Rocky Mountains thrust upward, rivers gashed deep channels in the crust, separating ranges with basins that gradually filled with eroded rock, trapping water beneath it. One of the largest aquifers in the world, the Ogallala, which runs through the 8 plain states, is not a vast subterranean lake, as one might imagine, but a 170,000 square mile layer of waterlogged earth, moving and twisting through strata of dry rock like a wet article of clothing in the laundry bin. Subject to eons of pressure, every aquifer arranges itself differently, forming vast networks of coves and seams of water, some 1,000 feet thick, but others just a thin vein. Aquifers are unimaginably complex and incredibly fragile. Once tapped, they can take more than 6,000 years to replenish. I'm about to stop reading this because it's getting very long. There's much more of this article. I'm going to read this last paragraph, I guess. Among the most vulnerable aquifers are those underlying the desert basins of the American Southwest. The Sulphur Springs Valley in Arizona's far southeastern corner is one such basin. Surrounded on three sides by steep mountain ranges, the valley is an unusually flat and level 1,900 square mile expanse of sagebrush and tanglegrass, which acts as a massive natural vessel for rain and snowmelt. In geological terms, it is a closed basin, as none of its water rejoins a river. Instead, it pools at the center, percolating into the ground. Centuries of evaporation have transformed this ancient lake bed into a dry, alkali flat, inhabited today by a migratory roost of 30,000 sandhill cranes. Beneath it, buried in layers of sediment, lies all the water that never flowed to the ocean. Some of it is more than 20,000 years old. And on that note, hold on. While we're so busy worrying about the water that we can see, Famiglietti told me the water that we can't see, the groundwater, is quietly disappearing. In the United States, it is disappearing most rapidly in the rural agricultural belt, extending from Kansas to California. Without ready access to more traditional stores of water, many farmers have been forced to rely even more heavily on groundwater, pitting them against local residents watching their wells grow dry. 2014 in Tulare County, California, 7,000 people ran out of drinking water. The next year, wells hit a record low, a 64% reported declines nationwide, and 1 in 30 failed in western states. Squeezed by drought and tightening regulations, large farms started to seek out lesser-known pockets of cheap water. In rural Arizona, where there are essentially no groundwater regulations governing irrigation, they found an ideal destination. Wow, okay. What the smart money is doing is looking around and saying, where else can we go where there is no regulation? So I think there are a lot of farms that are just dry in Central California. Like if you drive up the coast, up the middle of Central California, you'll see a lot of just dry orchards, a lot of old farmland just left to the desert, basically. And this is probably where most of those farmers are going. Where else can we go where there's no regulation? Robert Glennon, a professor of water law and policy at the University of Arizona and the author of Water Follies, told NPR in an interview, that is Arizona. That's all I'm going to read for tonight. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.